I noticed it on a Thursday. Not because I was paying particularly close attention. I worked the night shift at the Meridian Corporate Plaza as a security guard, and most nights blurred together into an endless procession of empty hallways, fluorescent lights, and the soft hum of HVAC systems. But on that particular Thursday, I was doing my rounds on the 14th floor when I heard something that made my skin prickle. Absolute silence. Now, you might think silence in an empty office building is the default, the baseline expectation. You'd be wrong. There's always something. The distant rumble of the building's mechanical systems, the settling of pipes, the electrical hum of equipment in standby mode, the occasional creak of expansion and contraction in the steel frame. But the 14th floor that night was different. It was the kind of silence that felt deliberate, as if the building itself was holding its breath. More importantly, it was filthy. As I walked past the row of offices and cubicles, I noticed dust particles hanging visibly in the beam of my flashlight. The desks were scattered with papers, crumpled coffee cups, and debris that should have been cleared hours ago. The cleaning crew, a professional outfit called Ascension Services that the building management had contracted, came every night between 9 p.m. and 2 a.m. It was nearly 2:30 a.m. now, well past their scheduled departure time. They should have already cleaned the 14th floor, yet here it was untouched. I made a mental note to mention it to the building manager, Derek, when I saw him in the morning. Derek ran a tight ship, or at least he liked to think he did, and he'd want to know that the cleaning service was falling behind on the job they were being paid for. I finished my rounds and headed back down to the security desk in the lobby, thinking nothing more of it. But the next night it happened again. The 14th floor was dirty. Not just a little untidy. I'm talking about visible grime on the desks, trash still in the bins, floors that hadn't been vacuumed. And I could see the cleaning crew's cart down on the 13th floor, where I could hear the mechanical whir of their industrial vacuum cleaner echoing through the stairwell. This time I didn't just make a note. I radioed Derek. "Hey Derek, you there?" I said, keying the radio. Static crackled back for a moment before Derek's voice came through, thick with the gravel of someone who'd been asleep. It was nearly 3 a.m. "What's up, Marcus?" The cleaning crew didn't do the 14th floor again. I can hear them on the 13th, but they're completely skipping 14. There was a pause. "That's weird. I'll talk to them about it. Maybe there's some reason. Maybe they had a maintenance issue or something needed repair." "Could be," I said, though something about the situation nagged at me. In all my months working at Meridian, the cleaning crew had been nothing if not meticulous. They were robots in human form, working their way through the building floor by floor with mechanical precision. "I'll look into it," Derek confirmed, and the radio clicked off. But Derek didn't look into it. Or if he did, he didn't find anything interesting enough to mention. And the following night, the 14th floor was dirty again. By the third night, I started paying closer attention. I positioned myself where I could see the cleaning crew as they worked their way through the building. They arrived right on schedule at 9 p.m., pushing their large cart loaded with supplies and their compact industrial vacuum. I watched them enter the elevators and go to work. They were efficient, always the same crew, 3 people. A stocky man with a salt and pepper beard who seemed to be the leader, a younger guy who couldn't have been more than 25, and a woman with gray streaks in her dark hair who always kept her head down and didn't speak much. The pattern became clear quickly. They would exit the elevator on the 10th floor and begin their methodical work upward. 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, and then they'd go straight to the 15th floor, completely skipping 14. Every single night. I waited until the next morning and cornered Derek in his office. "Hey, I need to talk to you about the cleaning crew," I said, closing the door behind me. Derek looked up from his computer, pushing his glasses higher on his nose. He was a man in his 50s, with the worn-down expression of someone who'd been managing buildings for too long. "Yeah, what about them?" "They're deliberately skipping the 14th floor. Every night they go to 13 and then jump straight to 15. It's not an accident, Derek. I watched them do it." Derek set down his coffee mug slowly. "You're sure?" "Completely sure. And the floor is getting filthy. Papers everywhere, dust, everything that should be cleaned is just sitting there." Derek leaned back in his chair, and I watched as something flickered across his face. It looked almost like fear, though he covered it quickly with a frown. Well, I'll call the company. There's probably an explanation. Is there? I pressed, because it seems pretty intentional to me. Like they're actively avoiding that floor. Derek didn't answer. He just picked up his phone and turned away slightly, signaling the end of our conversation. But as I left his office, I caught something he said into the receiver. Yeah, it's the 14th floor again. They're skipping it. I know. We've been through this before. Before? What did that mean? I should have pushed harder. I should have asked more questions. But I was tired, and the job paid decently, and it wasn't really my problem if some office building had weird cleaning crew issues. That's what I told myself anyway. That excuse would come back to haunt me in ways I couldn't have imagined. For the next 2 weeks, I tried to ignore the 14th floor. I'd do my rounds there quickly, trying not to look too closely at the accumulating filth, the dust motes that hung in my flashlight beam like tiny accusers. I told myself it wasn't my responsibility to figure out why the cleaning crew avoided it. But curiosity is a persistent thing. It grows in the dark, in the quiet moments, in the spaces between what we know and what we don't. One night, I decided to investigate the 14th floor more thoroughly. It was 1 a.m., which meant the cleaning crew was still somewhere in the building below me. I had maybe an hour before they'd typically finish and leave. I took the stairs up to 14 and made my way through the offices methodically, checking each room, looking for anything unusual. At first, there was nothing remarkable, just the standard corporate office space. Desks with computers, ergonomic chairs, filing cabinets, the accumulated detritus of people's professional lives. But as I moved deeper into the floor toward the western wing, I started to notice something odd. The offices became less maintained than the others. Furniture was overturned or pushed against walls. Whiteboards had strange symbols drawn on them, not the typical project notes or brainstorming sketches, but geometric patterns that seemed almost intentional in their arrangement. And in one particularly large office, what looked like a conference room, I found something that made my blood run cold. The walls were covered in photographs. They weren't the standard corporate headshots or team photos that you'd normally find in an office building. These were personal pictures, candid shots of people. Dozens of them. Some looked recent, printed in color on standard office paper. Others were older, faded, maybe from years ago. They were pinned to the walls with thumbtacks, arranged in some kind of pattern that I couldn't quite decipher, connecting different faces with red string in a way that screamed obsession. My heart was hammering now. I pulled out my phone and took a few pictures, my hands shaking slightly. I was so focused on the photographs that I almost missed the sound. It was soft at first, a kind of scratching or scraping noise coming from inside the walls. I pressed my ear against the drywall and held my breath. The sound continued for a moment, then stopped. The elevator chimed somewhere down the hall. The cleaning crew. I pulled myself together and quickly made my way out of the office, back into the main hallway. I was heading toward the elevator bank when I heard the doors open on the floor below and the sound of the cleaning crew's cart being wheeled out. They were early. I slipped into a nearby stairwell and waited, listening as I heard them push their cart toward the elevators. Then, and this part I'm still not entirely sure I heard correctly because it was so quiet, I heard the older man, the one with the salt and pepper beard, mutter something to the younger guy as they waited for the elevator. Thank God we're done for another night. I couldn't look at that floor again. Some things aren't meant to be cleaned. The elevator doors opened with a mechanical whoosh and their voices cut off. I heard the cart being loaded, the doors closing, and then silence. I stood in that stairwell for a long time, my mind spinning with questions. Some things aren't meant to be cleaned. What the hell did that mean? That's when I realized I needed to find out what had happened on that floor. What had made a professional cleaning crew so afraid that they'd rather risk losing their job than step onto the 14th floor? The next morning, I went to see Derek again. This time I didn't ask, I demanded, "What's on the 14th floor?" I said, walking into his office without waiting to be invited. And don't give me some vague answer. I heard the cleaning crew talking last night. They're terrified of that floor. So what happened there? Derek's face went pale. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes for a long moment before answering. "Marcus, it's better if you don't know." "Better for who?" "You. The company?" Because it's sure as hell not better for me working in a building with something going on that I don't understand. Derek stood up and walked to the window looking out over the city. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. There was an incident. About 4 years ago. A woman who worked on the 14th floor, she was the office manager for Castellan Securities, which occupied most of that floor back then. Her name was Eleanor Voss. One day she just disappeared. While she was at work, nobody saw her leave the building. Security footage showed her going into the conference room on the 14th floor at 2 p.m., but she never came back out. My stomach tightened. What do you mean she never came out? Did they find her? Eventually, 3 days later, she was found in the wall space between the offices on the 14th floor. In a crawl space that shouldn't have had anyone in it. She had been dead for at least 2 days at that point. The room tilted slightly. In the wall? How did she get into the wall? That's the thing, Derek said, turning back to me. The crawl space was sealed from the outside. There was no way for her to have accessed it from inside the offices. The only entrance was from outside the building, through the maintenance areas. But her belongings were found in there with her. Her purse, her phone, her shoes. She'd somehow ended up in a space that should have been inaccessible. That makes no sense, I said, but even as I was saying it, I was thinking about those photographs on the walls, the strange symbols, the scratching sound I'd heard inside the walls. No, Derek agreed. It doesn't. The police investigated it thoroughly. They interviewed everyone who worked on that floor. They reviewed all the security footage. And they concluded it was a suicide. Said she must have found some way to access the crawl space that we weren't aware of, that she deliberately went in there and did what she did. But you don't believe that, I said. It wasn't a question. No, Derek said quietly. I don't. Because even if somehow she'd managed to access that crawl space, the police couldn't explain the photographs. What photographs? Derek looked at me directly. They found hundreds of them in there with her. Pictures she'd taken, candid photographs of people in the building. On the walls, on the floor, scattered everywhere. Some of them going back years. And there were these strings connecting them, connecting different people. At first, the police thought it was evidence of some kind of obsession or psychological breakdown. But when they interviewed the people in the photographs, something strange came up. What? I asked, though I thought I already knew. None of them remembered being photographed. And in many cases, the photos were taken from locations that Eleanor shouldn't have had access to. Inside closed offices. Inside people's apartments outside the building. Some of the photos were from years before Eleanor even worked at the building. A chill ran down my spine. What did the police conclude? They didn't. Not really. The case became complicated. Eleanor's family wanted answers, but the official story was suicide. The building and Castellan Securities settled with her family. Castellan moved their offices to another floor. They took up space on the 15th and 16th floors. And Derek, the building manager before me, he made a decision. What decision? He contacted the cleaning crew and made them an offer. A substantial one. He told them that if they maintained the 14th floor to the best of their ability while never physically entering it, no entering the offices, no touching anything, nothing, they'd get a significant bonus. Every single one. He justified it to management as a cost-saving measure, saying they wanted to keep that floor closed for renovation or some other excuse. The crew accepted. I felt my legs get weak, and I sat down in one of Derek's office chairs without asking permission. Derek, that's insane. You can't just seal off an entire floor of the building. Can't I? Derek said tiredly. Who's going to complain? The offices are empty. Nobody works there anymore. Nobody wants to work there. And the cleaning crew, they understand something that I think you're starting to understand. Which is that some places shouldn't be disturbed. That some places have problems that cleaning won't fix. That some floors are better off left alone. I wanted to tell him he was crazy. I wanted to laugh it off and walk out of his office and forget everything he just told me. But I couldn't because I kept thinking about those photographs on the walls, and the scratching sounds in the darkness, and the way the cleaning crew had said, some things aren't meant to be cleaned. That night, I went to the 14th floor with a different purpose. I was going to find out what was really happening up there. I brought a flashlight, my phone, and a growing sense of dread that I couldn't quite shake. The 14th floor was exactly as I'd left it, dusty, cluttered, the photographs still covering the walls of that large conference room. But this time I was looking for something specific. I was looking for a way to understand what Derek had told me. I spent an hour examining the conference room more carefully. The photographs were arranged in patterns that almost made sense. Certain faces appeared more frequently than others. Some of the older pictures had been marked with handwritten notes in the margins. I photographed several of them with my phone, capturing dates and faces and the notes Eleanor Voss had written. "Who are you really?" read one note beneath the photo of a woman in business casual clothes, smiling unknowingly at the camera. "What are you doing here?" Same face. 3 locations. "Impossible," read another. But it was the largest collection of photographs, a whole section of the wall dedicated to the same face, repeated dozens of times, that made my blood run cold. Because I recognized that face. It was my face. Or at least, faces that could have been me. Different ages, different expressions, photographed in different locations. Some recent, some old. Some from places I'd definitely been, and some from places I couldn't possibly have access to. My hands started shaking. I pulled out my phone to photograph this section, and that's when I heard it. The scratching sound. But this time it wasn't faint. This time, it was loud and deliberate, and it was coming from inside the walls all around me. Then came the voices. I don't know how to describe them accurately. They weren't quite human voices, but they weren't completely inhuman either. They were distorted, echoing, as if they were coming from a great distance away through water or thick fog. But I could almost make out words. "Who's there?" one seemed to say. "Someone's looking," said another. "Someone's always looking," came a third. I bolted from the conference room and headed for the elevators, my heart slamming against my ribs. I jabbed the down button repeatedly, and when the doors finally opened, I practically threw myself inside. As the doors closed, I looked back down the hallway and saw something that I still can't fully explain. The air in the 14th floor hallway was moving. Not like wind, more like the hallway itself was breathing, expanding and contracting like a living thing. The walls seemed to shimmer, and in that shimmer I could see the faint outlines of other hallways, other corridors, other versions of the floor overlapping with the one I was in. The elevator doors closed and I was alone. I rode down in silence, every second feeling like an eternity. I was prepared to walk out of that building and never come back, to call in sick from now until the end of time, to find another job in another building in another city if necessary. But when I got to the lobby, I found Derek waiting for me at the security desk. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His clothes were wrinkled, his face was unshaven, and there was something in his eyes that looked like resignation mixed with pity. "You went to the 14th floor," he said. It wasn't a question. "I did," I admitted. "Did you hear them? What were those sounds, Derek? What's happening up there?" Derek sat down heavily in one of the lobby chairs. "Marcus, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen to me very carefully. Eleanor Voss didn't kill herself. I don't think she even died in any conventional sense. I think she became part of the 14th floor. I think something up there collected her, incorporated her into itself." "That's impossible," I said, but my voice was shaky. "Is it? Think about it. She was photographing people, all those photos. What if she wasn't just taking pictures? What if she was documenting something? What if the photographs were part of some kind of ritual or mechanism that served a purpose?" "What purpose?" "Recruitment," Derek said quietly. "I think the 14th floor is recruiting. I think Eleanor discovered something up there, and it showed her things, possible futures, alternate realities, versions of events that hadn't happened yet. And I think she became obsessed with it, trying to document it, trying to understand it. And eventually it pulled her in." "You're describing something supernatural," I said. "I know. That's insane. I know." I wanted to argue with him, to tell him he was wrong, that there had to be a rational explanation. But I kept thinking about those photographs of me, those versions of me in places I'd never been, and the way the hallway had seemed to breathe and shift around me. "Why haven't you evacuated?" I asked. "Why haven't you told anyone?" "Because I don't know what it is, and I don't know if it can leave the 14th floor, Derek said. "I don't know if it's contained or if it's growing. And I don't know what would happen if we tried to force the issue. What if evacuating the building and drawing attention to the floor is exactly what it wants? What if that's how it spreads? So you just let it sit there? Let it do whatever it's doing? What choice do I have? I'm a building manager, Marcus, not an exorcist. I don't know how to fight something I don't understand. All I know is that the Ascension cleaning crew, they figured it out faster than any of us. They realized that the best course of action was to leave it alone. Don't disturb it. Don't provoke it. Let it have its floor and hopefully it stays contained there." I left the building that night without saying another word to Derek. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning with impossible explanations and implications. When I got to my apartment, I immediately went through my phone and looked at the photos I'd taken on the 14th floor. Every single one of them, all the pictures of the photographs, all the documentation of Eleanor's work, they were corrupted. The files were intact, but the image data was scrambled, showing only static and geometric patterns and shapes that hurt to look at. All of them except for two. The first was the photograph of Eleanor's handwriting. "Who are you really? What are you doing here?" The second was one of the photos of myself, multiplied and repeated across the wall. But in this particular photo, I wasn't smiling. I wasn't trying to look natural or unaware. In this photo, I was staring directly at the camera with an expression that was knowing and patient and somehow older than I'd ever felt. I didn't go back to work for 3 weeks. I told them I was sick. I didn't leave my apartment. I barely slept. When I did sleep, I had nightmares about hallways that stretched forever and voices that called my name from behind walls. Eventually, though, I had to face facts. I needed the job. I needed the paycheck. And I was slowly going insane from sitting alone with my thoughts. So I called Derek and told him I was coming back. "Are you sure?" he asked over the phone. There was something almost protective in his tone, like he was giving me an out, a last chance to walk away permanently. "No," I said. "But I'm coming back anyway." When I returned to work, I found that Derek had reassigned me. I was no longer doing rounds on the 14th floor. In fact, my route had been restructured so that I'd never have to go anywhere near that floor. I was grateful for that, even if I didn't say it explicitly. But the thing about working in a building with a secret is that the secret has a way of making itself known, no matter what precautions you take. The first sign was that people started asking me strange questions. Other security guards, people who worked in the building during the day, office workers who I'd never seen before. They'd approach me casually, as if making conversation, and then slip in an odd query: "Have you seen anything unusual on the 14th floor?" Or, "Do you ever notice anything strange about the building?" Or my personal favorite, delivered by a woman in the elevator at 3 a.m. one night: "Are you in any of the photographs?" I started to realize that I wasn't the only person who knew about the 14th floor. In fact, I was probably one of the last to find out. The knowledge seemed to exist in the building in some kind of collective unconscious, acknowledged by some, denied by others, but present in everyone's awareness like a background radiation. The cleaning crew started acting differently too. The first night I noticed was the night they did their rounds while I was stationed in the lobby. I watched them arrive, get their cart, and begin their nightly work. But tonight there was a new person with them, a fourth crew member I'd never seen before. She was younger, maybe early 20s, with dark hair and an anxious expression. The 3 regular crew members stopped before they could enter the elevators, and I watched as the older man pulled the new girl aside. He was speaking to her in low, urgent tones. She shook her head vigorously, trying to back away, but the others gently took her arms. "What's going on?" I radioed Derek in his apartment upstairs. There was a long pause before he responded. "They're briefing her. She needs to understand the rules." "What rules?" "The rule," Derek corrected himself, "don't go to the 14th floor. Ever. Under any circumstances." That night I made a decision. I was going to learn the truth about what was actually happening on that floor. Not through photographs or overheard conversations or Derek's second-hand accounts. I was going to find real documentation, Police reports, autopsy records, anything that might explain the objective reality of what had happened to Eleanor Voss. It took me a week to get what I needed through a private investigator I hired and several very large payments. But eventually, I had copies of the police report from Eleanor's death, and what I found was almost worse than not knowing. The official report did conclude suicide, but the details were troubling. Eleanor had been found in a sealed crawlspace wearing clothes that didn't match the outfit she'd been seen wearing on security footage earlier that day. She was physically decomposed as if she'd been dead for at least 3 days, yet the last sighting of her was only 1 day before the body was discovered. And perhaps most disturbingly, the autopsy showed no clear cause of death. No toxins, no trauma, no medical condition that would have killed her. Her organs were simply shutting down, as if her body had simply decided to stop existing. But there was one detail that the police report only briefly mentioned, probably because they had no way to explain it. Eleanor's brain showed unusual activity patterns at the time of death. The neurologist who examined her wrote, "Patterns suggest simultaneous neural activity consistent with thousands of subjective experiences occurring at once, incompatible with normal human cognition." I read that report a dozen times trying to make sense of it. What did that mean? How could someone experience thousands of subjective experiences simultaneously? And more importantly, what did that have to do with the 14th floor? The answer came to me in the middle of the night, jolting me awake with the force of sudden clarity. The photographs. Eleanor's photographs weren't surveillance photos. They were recordings. They were evidence of other versions of reality, other versions of people, other timelines or dimensions or states of being that existed alongside our own. And the 4th floor? Or perhaps it was something else, something that happened to occupy the space of the 14th floor, was the focal point where those realities converged. Eleanor had discovered it, documented it, tried to understand it. And the more she studied it, the more she investigated it, the more she became entangled in those other realities. Until finally, she didn't exist in just one reality anymore. She existed in all of them simultaneously. And her body, being only capable of existing in one reality at a time, couldn't handle that kind of multidimensional presence. So it shut down. That night, I called Derek from my car parked outside the building. "I know what's on the 14th floor," I said. There was a moment of silence. "Then, you figured it out. It's not a haunting or a ghost or anything supernatural in the conventional sense. It's something that exists across multiple realities simultaneously. And it's attracted Eleanor because she was trying to document it. It pulled her into itself because she became too integrated with it." "Yes," Derek said quietly. "I think you're right. And I think it's been here longer than we know. I think it might be older than the building itself. And I think it's always been looking for someone to help it document what it is." "Why?" I asked, though I was afraid I already knew the answer. "I don't know," Derek said. "Maybe it's lonely. Maybe it's trying to communicate. Maybe it's trying to survive by creating observers, by creating people who are aware of it and willing to look at it and think about it. As long as someone is thinking about the 14th floor, as long as someone is documenting it and trying to understand it, maybe it persists. Maybe it matters." I was quiet for a long time. Then I asked the question I'd been avoiding. "Why did it show me photographs of myself?" "Because," Derek said, and I could hear the sadness in his voice, "it's inviting you to become an observer too." I didn't go back to work the next night, or the night after that. I called and quit, citing family reasons. Derek accepted my resignation without comment, but before I hung up, he said one more thing. "Marcus, don't look for more information about the 14th floor. Don't try to investigate further. That's how Eleanor started. That's how it gets you. The more you look, the more you see. The more you see, the more it sees you. The best thing you can do now is forget about it. Pretend it doesn't exist. Let the cleaning crew do their job and let the 14th floor have its floor." I tried to follow that advice. I really did. I got a new job at a different building on the other side of the city. For 3 months, I didn't think about the Meridian Corporate Plaza. I didn't think about Eleanor Voss or Derek or the cleaning crew or the photographs. But the problem with knowledge is that you can't unknow it. The problem with experiencing something inexplicable is that it leaves a scar on your sense of reality. And the problem with being invited to become an observer of something strange is that the invitation never really goes away. It just gets quieter, waiting for a moment when your defenses are down. That moment came last week. I was driving past the Meridian Corporate Plaza on my way home from work, and I saw something that made me pull over. The cleaning crew was standing outside the building in the parking lot, and they were refusing to enter. I could see them from the street. The salt and pepper man, the young guy, the woman with gray streaks, and what looked like 5 or 6 other people. All of them were standing in the parking lot, shaking their heads, refusing to go inside. I don't know what made me do it, but I parked and walked over to them. "What's going on?" I asked the older man. He looked at me and recognition flickered across his face. "You worked here," he said. "You're the security guard who quit." "That's right. Why won't you go inside?" "Because," he said slowly, "something changed. We can feel it. The thing on the 14th floor, it's not contained anymore. It's spreading." "What do you mean, spreading?" "We can feel it on the other floors now. In the air, in the walls, in the way the building breathes. And we can't work in a building where it's free to move. We told the company. We told them we're walking. This job isn't worth what comes next." I felt my stomach drop. "Have you told the building manager? Have you reported this?" "We tried," the woman with gray streaks said. "We called Derek this morning. He didn't answer. When we called the building number and had the day staff check on him, they found him in his office." "Found him how?" I asked, though I was certain I didn't want to know. "Sitting at his desk, staring at the wall, not responding to anything. The paramedics took him to the hospital, but the doctors can't find anything wrong with him. He's just somewhere else now." I walked back to my car on shaking legs. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I knew what had happened to Derek. He'd gone to the 14th floor one too many times. He'd thought about it too much. He'd become too much of an observer, and the thing that lived there had finally decided to make him part of its grand observation. That was a week ago. Since then, I haven't been able to stop thinking about the 14th floor. And I know that's exactly what it wants. I know that every thought I have about it, every moment I spend obsessing about what's happening there, is exactly the kind of attention it feeds on. I keep thinking about what the older man said, that the entity is spreading. Is it breaking containment? Is it growing stronger? Is it moving toward the rest of the city, toward other buildings, other cities, other people? Or is that paranoia? Am I exaggerating the threat because I've let my fear control me? I don't know anymore. That's the worst part. The uncertainty, the not knowing, the creeping dread that something is happening that I can't see or understand or stop. And that's why I'm writing this. That's why I'm documenting everything, making it all real and permanent and impossible to ignore. Because maybe Derek was right. Maybe Eleanor was trying to do the right thing when she took those photographs. Maybe the 14th floor needs observers. Maybe it needs people to acknowledge that it exists, to think about it, to write about it, to share the story. Maybe that's the only way to keep it contained. By giving it what it wants, attention, observers, a narrative, a place in the collective consciousness. Or maybe I'm just rationalizing the fact that I've already become infected. Maybe I'm already part of its observation. Maybe everyone who reads this story and thinks about it and wonders about it becomes part of it too. I guess I'm about to find out. Because I just received an email from a forwarded address. No text, no explanation. Just an attachment. I'm almost afraid to open it, but I will. Because I can already feel the curiosity pulling at me like hooks in my skin. I can already feel that same obsessive hunger that Eleanor Voss must have felt. The need to know. The need to understand. The need to look deeper into the darkness and see what's looking back. I'm opening the attachment now. It's photographs. Dozens of them, hundreds of them. And they're all of me. In my apartment. In my car. In my new job. In places I've been alone, with no one watching, with no camera, with no possible way for someone to capture images of me in those private moments. But there they are. Me. Smiling. Staring. Waiting. And in each one the face is just a little bit older. Just a little bit more tired. Just a little bit less human than the one before. The last photograph in the sequence isn't dated yet. But I know what it shows. And I know that I'm going to have to go back to the Meridian Corporate Plaza one more time. The 14th floor is waiting for me. And I'm starting to think I've been waiting for it too. I just didn't know it yet.